Hello folks, welcome back. This is the final part of the lecture on qualitative data collection. And in this part of the lecture, I will talk about another qualitative method, which is called ethnography. Well, at the very end of the last video, I said ethnography is another popular qualitative method. When I said that, I put it in the sense of the methods which are used by social scientists or any researcher who is doing research in a social science domain. So it doesn't necessarily refer to your dissertation. Whereas if we put in the frame of your dissertation, not many students actually would use this method, and you will find out why later when we talk about the details of this research method. Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about what ethnography is and why we would use this method, and how to conduct this method, and two types of the observations which are involved in ethnography. Okay, first thing first, definition. So this word ethnography is a Greek word, comes from Greek language, and the wide meaning of ethnography is writing about people. Okay, writing about people. And we also have a narrow meaning of this word, ethnography, which is writing about a particular group of people. So this particular group of people could be a social group, could be a cultural group or religious group, etc. So it is writing about people or writing about a particular group of people. Okay, so that's the literal meaning of ethnography. Whereas the ethnography in research, we are trying to understand a group of people or people in general about their lives throughout a certain period of time. Okay, by what ways we can use to actually conduct ethnography, we tend to observe what's happening in this social group. For example, if you want to study a certain group of migrants in the country, so you can go into their lives and live with them and study them while watching them. Or if you want to study, let's say, a original tribe, or you want to study factory workers, you can actually go into their life and watch what they are doing in their everyday life, or how they work in their factories or in their workplace. Okay, right. There are some characteristics of this method, ethnography. As you can tell, if you actually go to the field of their life or go to the field of their workplace, it is more possible that you can get a natural data, isn't it? So instead, so it is harder for them to fake their answers compared with if you ask a person what they would do in their workplace. If you ask them in a lab or in a room, and they, or in a coffee house, they could fake their answers, and then you probably don't know. And in this method, ethnography, you actually go to their place, or you live with them, or you work with them, so that you can get a more natural data, and you can get a more kind of real data of what they actually perform in their real life and what they actually perform in their workplace. Okay, so that's a kind of a strong element of this research method, ethnography. And ethnography is a umbrella term, so it does not restrict to a particular technique that you would use. Okay, we will talk about different forms of methods that we can use under this umbrella term of ethnography. Okay. Why we are studying, sorry, not we are studying, why you are learning now ethnography, and why would we teach ethnography here is we find ethnography is a good method if you want to study a social process. So let's say if you want to understand the process of a phenomenon, of something, it is harder if we use any quantitative method, because when we're designing our quantitative method, it is usually the case that we would ask, you know, about certain result of something. It's hard to understand the dynamic of changes throughout the process, and the rich data and the nuances of changes throughout a period of time. So if we actually go to the field or go to the workplace and live with them or work with them, it's easier for us to detect any changes in a certain process, isn't it? Okay, and another reason that we usually say why using an ethnography research method is that from a naturalism point of view, if you're interested, you could Google or use any other search engine that you like, and to try to learn about naturalism philosophy if you're interested. So from a naturalist point of view, we could actually get a better understanding if we put ourselves into a natural setting, especially when we study social actors like human, because human more complicated than machines or than the physical objects. Whereas in a naturalist point of view, when we are using this ethnography method, it could help us to understand a social actor in their natural setting. So let's say if we want to study farmers, it's probably easier for us just to go to their farm field and observe what they are doing rather than asking them questions. They probably would be struggling to answer some of your questions, or they could give you fake answers. I mean, when I say fake, they don't have to be intentionally to provide you a fake answer, but you know, for anyone you interview, it's possible because of any reason, out of maybe self-esteem or anything, or some people don't even realize that they are talking, I mean, not very true answers. Okay, and there is a term here I want to introduce called an ecological validity. This is another type of validity, which is also about rigor. Okay, ecological validity. This is related to that the difference between the data that you can get from, let's say, a lab or and the data that you can get in the natural setting. So let's say if you are conducting an experiment and you ask your participant what you would do in certain scenario, and they would provide you some answers. There, they assume that they would do this or they would do that in certain scenario, but that may not be the case when they actually face the scenario. You know, they could perform differently, and that there are a lot of different like psychological reasons behind that. And so ecological validity is to minimize the difference. Okay, if you have a high ecological validity, we should have less difference between what data we can get in a lab or in an interview and compare with the data we can get, you know, in their natural setting. So what the interviewee would actually do or perform in that scenario in their real life. Okay. So when we are using research methods such as ethnography is one of the highest on ecological validity in terms of the research design, because it allows you to actually observe what's real happening in their life or in their workplace. And it's hard to fake, although they could, but it's harder to fake compare with if you just ask them in an interview. Okay, so how do we actually conduct the ethnography method? Well, the most obvious method would be observe. So we go to their field and observe what they perform on a daily basis, and quite often we take notes. There is a term I want to introduce, which is called autoethnography. Autoethnography is where you yourself already being a member of. Let's say if you want to study factory workers, and if you yourself already a factory worker, you know, the way how your personal experience how your experience would influence your research process, or would influence your research output, because you already have knowledge on it, and you can actually write about your own knowledge or write about your own experience, because you yourself fit to your research sample, and you can write about your work experience, or if the factory's work experience is what you want to study. Okay, so that's the autoethnography. I want to bring up this or flag up this concept, because this could be the case for some of the students when you want to study, for example, a consultant, and you yourself probably is a consultant. And when you study about consultants, your own experience could affect your research output. If you're interested, we do have, I think, Bryman and Bell's book. One of our core textbooks have a certain paragraph, also a section on autoethnography. You can have a look at that. Okay, now it's my question time for you guys. Thinking about this question, does ethnography equal to participant observation? Okay, participant observation basically means you observe your participants. Okay, you you observe the people you want to study. So does ethnography equal to participant observation? And I'd give you 10 seconds to think about this question. Okay, that's about 10 seconds. And if you want more time, please pause the video and continue thinking about this question. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about my answers to this question. Okay, predominantly, participant observation is the most popular method or the technique used in ethnography. Well, they do not equal to each other because ethnography covers more. So ethnography covers more than just participant observation. Although the dominant technique is to observe, so it forms, so the participant observation forms the majority of the method or the technique that we are using in a ethnographical research. But it also involves others like using interviews or reading through documents, archivals, or images, or even CCTV videos. I think I've listed a couple of sources that we can look at when we try to conduct a ethnographical research. Okay, here are some of the other type of data source. So besides the observation, where we can go to the field and observe what's happening in the field. So there are other types of data that we could use. So we could look at the company policy documents. We could conduct some interviews with our participants. While observing them, we could also conduct some interviews. We could do a research diary, or we could look at some of the company archivals. We could look at some policies. We could look at as I said, some CCTV videos that the company already has. If you manage to have access to that, you can also have a look at the video recordings there. This is what I mean by umbrella term. So ethnography is umbrella term. So under this umbrella, we could do many techniques, including observation, including interviews, or reading documents, or reading some images, or recordings of videos, etc. So it's a group, a set of methods or techniques that we can use, covered by the umbrella term of ethnography. But the key is to go to the field and observe. Okay, and there is a new term called cyber ethnography, or in some books, and like in Bryman's book, I think they call them net ethnography. And no matter which word that they call, it refers to the same thing. So it refers to the ethnography under the internet domain. Okay, so it's internet or technology-based ethnography. And so traditionally, if you're an ethnographer, you would go to the field, you would go to the factory, or you could go to the farm, go to the company and observe. Whereas cyber ethnography or net or internet ethnography would allow you to do it remotely, and as long as you have internet access. So for example, you could go to an online forum and watch what's going on in the forum look at their conversations, or you can also be part of the conversation. Or you can go to Twitter and track through the changes of a topic, okay, or of an event. For example, when Brexit started, there were a lot of tweets around it, so you can actually follow the track of what's been talked there. So you are kind of emerging into their natural setting, and so not actually in the field, but yeah, it is a field. It is a virtual field that you are going to. Okay, so this is something new, and if you're interested, you could have a look at some of the books on cyber ethnography or net ethnography. And finally, I want to talk about two types of participant observation. So we mentioned that the participant observation is the dominant format used in ethnography. So we have these two formats. One is called overt observation, and the other one is called covert observation. Covert observation is where your participants do not know that you are doing a research there. So you are conducting a research, but your participants do not know. You're basically hiding. So you pretend that you're just perform your everyday life, or you perform your everyday work. For example, if you want to study, let's say, discrimination at workplace, you could actually go to a company and work in that company and observe whether there's discriminatory behaviors occurred in that workplace. And by doing that, you're doing a covert observation. And overt is the other way around. It is when you expose your role, that you let your participants know that you are doing a research. Again, so you can go to a company and study the workers there, and they know that you are studying them. So that's is a covert observation. Sorry, that's an overt observation. So overt is that they know, and covert is they do not know. And there are advantages and disadvantages of each type of the observation. And I would like to think about what would be the advantages or disadvantages for each form of the observation. Again, please pause the video now and think about this question. I've also put the question in this bubble at the bottom of the slide. Okay, please continue pause the video if you haven't finished thinking about this question. And just to save time, I would continue, but yeah, feel free to pause and come back to the video when you are ready. All right, some strength of the overt type of observation. So in the overt, where you expose yourself and as your role of a researcher and in the place that you want to study. So when people know that you are observing them, the strength is you have a better ethical and kind of support here, because you're not trying to hide, and the people know that what you are doing. So it's more ethically sound. And if people know that you are studying them, you could actually take note, isn't it? So when you take note, people do not feel strange. They know you would probably take note as a researcher there. And you can conduct other forms of ethnography. So you can conduct, like, let's say you can conduct interviews to some of the participants that you are interested, and they probably feel fine because they know you are studying them. And you can ask for other data sources, like you can ask for companies' documents, archival documents, policy documents, or marketing documents. And you can take photos, you can take videos, and as long as you get access to all of these methods, and you're fine. And compare with if you're conducting a covert research, isn't it? Okay, some disadvantages of using overt observation is the most obvious, or the most difficult part is the access. It is not easy to gain access if people know that you want to study them, or if the company know that you want to study the company, unless the company, that's another story. If the company ask you to study them, or hire you to study them, or ask you as a consultant to study some of the issues that they want to solve. Well, as for overt research, there is another commonly mentioned kind of side effect or disadvantage, which is called Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect refers to the impact which is brought by you studying them. Okay, so when you are doing an overt research, you present at the place. Let's say you present at the workplace, and your presence make people aware and may change people's behavior. Okay, there is a famous study where this concept of Hawthorne effect emerged, which is from an electricity factory. And so basically, this electricity factory was trying to improve their productivity. So they have taken certain interventions on it. So they have bring out breaks, and they have changed their lighting, and they have improved their food. Whereas the productivity of this electricity factory has been improved, but we do not know whether it is those intervention mechanisms which has improved the productivity, or it is the fact that they have researchers there, and the factory workers know that they have researchers there and they are being observed. It could be the case that it is purely because there are researchers there, and these researchers made those factory workers, aware that they should perform better, or they should improve their productivity, no matter they have offered other things or not. So that is a effect called Hawthorne effect. So when you expose yourself, your purpose in the workplace, it is possible that people behave differently, or they try to cope with the purpose of why you are here. Okay. About the covert type of observation is where you try to hide your purpose, you try to not expose the purpose of your research, of you being a researcher and observing others. So the strength is that when you cannot negotiate access, when you are not successful in gaining access to study the group of people, you could actually study them by being an workers, for example, being an employee, and with them, so that you can study them. And this probably would not create the Hawthorne effect, because people around you do not know that you're studying them, so they would not change their behavior or change their attitude. They would just going on with what they would normally doing. So that would minimize the effect of Hawthorne effect. The weakness, yes, it definitely has weaknesses, especially the ethical ground is too low, and that as a student here, you are not allowed to do covert observation. It is forbidden here, and because of the ethical issue, the potential ethical issue, because people do not know, you do not give them enough consent, informed consent. Remember this term that we introduced in the lecture on ethics, research ethics from the second lecture. Yeah, so by doing a covert observation, apparently you do not have the informed consents, because your study subject or the people that you study do not know that they are being studied, and they should know under the ethical code in this university. And also because you're trying to hide your purpose, you can only observe, and it's very hard for you to take note, because you have to perform your everyday job as well, and it's hard to get other methods to go with it. And like it will be very difficult for you to conduct interviews in the company, because you're trying to hide that you're studying them. Okay, so these are the two types of the participant observation. Yeah. We have reached the conclusions of the lecture on qualitative research or qualitative data collection. Right, which I have summarized a couple of key messages that I want to readdress. One is that the qualitative data collection, or the qualitative data, is very much context-based. Okay, so we try to build up our analysis on a certain context, which usually means we need to be very, very specific, isn't it? When we are having a small sample size, we try to narrow down the context that we study, so we can have an in-depth understanding. And we try to be as rigorous as possible when we design our research. And about sampling, we have introduced the purposive sampling and theoretical sampling. And if you forget about them, feel free to review those sampling strategies. And a very important message there is, for qualitative research method, we do have sampling strategies. Many students often forget about it, and they can easily think about sampling strategy when they are doing a quantitative research. But when they are doing qualitative research, many students tend to forget that you also need a sampling strategy for your qualitative, when you are doing a qualitative research. And qualitative data, we have multiple sources of data. So in this lecture, we have mentioned interviews, and we have different format of interviews. Remember that? Structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. And we have ethnography. We can use policy documents. We can use, like, for example, some HR policy documents. We can use companies' annual report. We can use some of the documents produced by the workers as well. So not only from the company's side, but also from the workers' side, especially when there is a union, a trade union. So you can also look at the union documents. So you are building kind of a two sides argument there. Okay, so there are different type of qualitative data. And some new types of data, including visuals. So images and videos can also be good qualitative data. And finally, think carefully about who you want to study, who you want to engage, and why you want to involve them. This is very important because from my past experience, when I supervise dissertations, and at the very beginning of their dissertation process, many students would, seems like they randomly propose to interview this bunch of people without thinking too much on why these bunch of people would be the most appropriate, or would be appropriate, at least, if not most appropriate, but at least should be appropriate, a group of people that you want to study. So it's not that taking into granted whoever you have access to, but think about whoever would be the best suitable for your research question. Okay, that's it of today's lecture. I will see you in the next lecture on qualitative data analysis. See you there.